If you've always wanted to know what it takes to be a commercial director, you need to check out commercialdirectingfilmschool.com. I'm signed up for the Filmmaker Bundle, which includes the Masterclass, the Online Shadow, and the Case Study Masterclass. It's got 100% 5-star reviews, and it also includes a 30-minute call with the master himself, my friend Jordan Brady, who's directed more than 1,300 commercials for top brands. And right now, exclusively for my listeners, use the code BIGIDEA, one word, to get a whopping $100 off either the Masterclass or the Shadow course. Again, the code BIGIDEA, one word, for $100 off. Go to commercialdirectingfilmschool.com and get started today. Welcome back to the podcast, Confessions of a Creative Director, the original podcast made by a creative director for creative directors, for aspiring creative directors, for creatives of all types looking to up their game. This is your podcast, and I am your host, Jaime Cabrera. We're celebrating our 50th episode of the podcast today, and boy, do we have an incredible guest to mark this special occasion. Today, we're talking with the brilliant and super humble Greg Hahn, co-founder and chief creative officer of Mischief, which was recently ranked among the top 3 best agencies in the world by AdAge. The whole freaking world, people. He's pulling back the curtain to share some of the guiding principles and philosophies that make Mischief such a magical, mystical, and almost mythical shop. And we're also going to get a glimpse of Greg, the kid from Ohio, who dreamed of becoming a guitar shredding god. So, without further ado, let's get into it with Greg Hahn. Greg Hahn, good morning.
Good morning. Actually, afternoon.
Afternoon for you.
Yeah, are you on West Coast, I take it?
I am. I'm in Long Beach.
Long Beach, nice.
Yeah.
I'm New York, opposite side.
On the opposite coast. It's great to have you on the show, and I kind of had a feeling, and I want to ask you about this. I'm wearing this shirt in honor of you. It's my Chelsea Guitars shirt, and it just so happens it's got skulls on it, just like the like the shirt that you're wearing. So I think the universe is telling us something that it's going to be a great show.
Well, also I texted you last night and asked you what you were wearing.
That too, but don't give away the secrets of the show. No, but you know what? I've always wondered this. You have a very rock and roll vibe about you. Were you ever in a band or anything like that?
I was.
And I love it. Really? All right.
I was back in, way back in like high school and college. I will tell you though, if you were to ask like the 16-year-old me what I was going to be, it was going to be like the next Eddie Van Halen.
Really?
And I quickly learned that the world was pretty happy with the Eddie Van Halen already had in the 1,000 copies album. I actually went to... the summer before I graduated college, I went to Hollywood. I lived in the pits of Hollywood and attended the Guitar Institute of Technology with a bunch of shredders. Yeah. And I was like, my parents were kind of cool enough to let me go and get it out of my system, because that's exactly what it did. This is like hair metal. If you ever saw Decline of Western Civilization Part 2, I do recommend that movie. It was during that time. So it was like Sunset Strip was just bands up and down, handing out flyers like Guns N' Roses, Poison. They're all out there. And I went to study guitar, and it's like, that's what I'm going to be. And then I'll never forget this. I had this one teacher there that was like the most amazing guitar player I've ever personally known. As good as anybody out there. I mean, this is a very... it's a very well acclaimed school, so anybody who taught there is amazing, right?
Right.
So I like, if I could work 5 hours a day practicing and studying, hopefully I'd be like half as good as this guy was. So one night I remember walking home from school with my guitar in my back. I cut through a parking lot in Hollywood. I saw him working the attendance station. I was like, shit, man, if that guy can't make it, I probably should try to find a plan B somewhere. But so that kind of was a good dose of reality. It's really hard to make it. Yeah,
it is a hard business. I tried it myself too. I'm a songwriter and play, sing and play guitar and stuff. And that's what brought me out to California, and I gave it a shot. And it is a tough
Well,
business.
I heard you talk about it. I know you're far more successful than I was, and
I
you've
don't know
got
about that. I
more
don't know about
guitars.
that.
But
But
yeah,
we'll
that's
have to have you been to Chelsea Guitars, by the way?
I
It's in
haven't.
the yeah, it's right outside the Chelsea Hotel, or the Hotel Chelsea. I forget how you the correct
I've heard that. I've heard of it.
but it's really cool. Tiny, tiny little place, and they have really great guitars. And the owners is a crack up, and so that's
Oh,
cool.
cool.
I figured that maybe you had some kind of musical bent to you. So we'll have to talk more about that. Maybe jam sometime. I'd
Yeah.
love to see what kind of stuff you're into. But that kind of leads in perfectly to what I wanted to talk about a little bit. We're going to get to sort of the Mischief way and give people a sneak peek behind, the curtain of what makes you and the agency so successful. But I wanted to talk a little bit about you as sort of a human being, right? And I love that you shared that story about your attempt to become a rock and roll guitar
Hmm.
god. But what was Greg Hahn? I have two boys, 12 and 14. What was Greg Hahn like at that around that age? Can you tell us a little bit about the younger you?
Yeah, I mean that was still a big part of my life. I was very much into music, but I was always one of those kids. I wasn't a jock. I didn't really fit into one group. I could pretty easily hang with any clique, but I was never like the jockey or the homecoming king. Um, or the I sort of had my foot in a lot of different worlds. Yeah, but yeah, I mean I had a pretty normal. I grew up in Ohio, very normal, sort of Midwestern, what you would see in the grew up in the 80s, what you would see in a sitcom or something like that.
Yeah.
And as soon as I graduated, I went to Ohio State, which had no advertising school at all. It did not
Yeah.
prepare me to get a job in advertising. But as soon as I graduated, I just moved out to the West Coast. I spent a lot of time in, I moved to San Diego, spent a lot of time in LA, a lot of my adult life in LA, and then have been back and forth. I went to, took 5 years, 4 years in Minneapolis to work at Fallon, and
Okay.
then yeah, and then came back to LA, and now I'm in New York. So I kind of bounced around, but grew up in Ohio.
So, growing up in Ohio, when did you start to think, obviously you were already thinking about music and stuff, but when did you start to think that you wanted to maybe go into this kind of business, or was it, something else
Yeah,
about creativity that you were interested in? And like, what did you, since there wasn't an ad school there, what did you major in?
yeah. I've always had a creative bent. Originally, before I got into music, I thought I was going to be an artist, like an illustrator, a cartoonist. So I spent a lot of time doing that too. But I always wanted to do something creative. I don't have a mathematical mind or an analytical mind so much. Numbers go right over my head. So I knew it'd be somewhere in the liberal arts. So I went to Ohio State, liberal arts major. I originally studied psychology, which I
Hmm.
love. I still do to this day, kind of
Yeah.
have a fascination with it. And moved into journalism, which was like the closest thing they had to advertising at Ohio State.
Yeah.
So I graduated with a degree in journalism.
Wow, that's really interesting, and all those things probably coming into play, right,
Hmm.
in your work in terms of
Yeah,
like
100%. Yeah.
psychology, right, understanding the consumer and that sort of thing, and probably the journalism. So you're more of a you came up more as a writer.
I did. I ended up yeah, I gravitated more towards writing. And like you said, a lot of it is psychology. A lot of what we do is psychology. I'm still kind of fascinated with behavioral economics and that kind of thing.
So what how do you scratch that itch? I take it you're maybe a big reader. You listen
Yeah,
to podcasts, or how do you
exactly.
scratch that?
Uh, yeah, read podcasts. I'm like a podcast junkie, and also audiobooks because I've just found them a much easier way to take in the information. You can drive around and listen to it or walk around. New York City is great for just kind of walking around, learning shit.
Yeah. And so, nowadays, most days, are you working from home? Are you going commuting into an office, or what's that situation like?
We have an office in Brooklyn. We do 2 days kind of set, and then the rest of the week you can do what you want. Most people, well, I guess it's kind of split. There's a lot of people that are young and they live in Brooklyn and they like to hang out at the office because maybe they have roommates or something like that. So it's a cool space to hang out. But I come in at least twice a week, sometimes more, and I like it. I think it seems to work out for my lifestyle that I can come and go as I please. I live probably 7 minutes away from the office, so it's
Wow.
pretty casual. we like to think of it more as it's like a hangout space, but we do have conference rooms and some of the other things that you would need to run a business. But it's good. It's got a good vibe. There's probably about 60 people in New York, maybe.
Yeah.
And we have people scattered throughout.
And are there any plans for? I mean, your whole model is built on kind of this idea, right? You kind of were created at the perfect time where it's like you're kind of shifting the model. We can do things, move very quickly over a Zoom call as opposed to flying and pitching and doing all that kind of stuff. But are there any plans to open offices in other cities like LA? Hint, hint. Asking for
Yeah,
asking for a
I
friend.
know. One day I will go back to LA. I think that would depend on where the business takes us.
Yeah.
We are flexible right now. There's no need for us to have an office anywhere other than just I really like some warm weather. But
Yeah.
so not enough business office or business reason to start an office. But if there was a client out there that demanded it, or that just felt like it'd be easier to work out there, then we would. We're a very, as the name No Fixed Address would imply, a flexible model.
Yeah. I read something really interesting. I think you posted it, and you said that the biggest compliment that you've received about your agency was at your holiday party. And I think that the owner of the venue or the bar where you guys were having the party said, "Wow, it really seems like you guys really love each other and like hanging out with each other." Can you
Yeah,
tell me about that?
yeah. It's funny you remember that because it did stick with me as like of all the things we've got, all the accolades we've gotten. It was actually a bartender at this place, and she's like, "What do you guys do?" She says to Kevin, and he's like, "Oh, we're an ad agency." And she's like, "You all work together?" And we're like, "Yeah, we were in the same office." And she said, "We have a lot of office Christmas parties here. I've never seen people like each other that much." And I was like, "That's great," because it wasn't forced. It's not. It's very natural. We all just feel like we're on the same mission, and just we hire people that are open-minded and easy to get along with, but really super talented.
Yeah. Well, congratulations to you, because I think that's probably a testament to your leadership and just kind of your way. You seem like just kind of a very kind and genuine, empathetic person. So I think that probably says a lot about you. I would imagine. I don't mean to embarrass you, but I would imagine that's you're the leader of the group. So I think you probably set the tone for that.
Well, thank you for that, first of all. We tried. I think everybody that's there exudes that. So it's not just me. Obviously, wouldn't just be me. But I do think the tone of the place is kind of that way. We started with the mantra of what would you do if you're not afraid, and so there's an openness. There's a spirit of non-judgment there, which I like.
Yeah, that's great, and that kind of takes us into what I wanted to talk about when we were having kind of our discovery call, right, and thinking about, well, what can we talk about? You started telling me about these two different things, right? It's the mischief mindset and the mischief way. And so often, just in my own experience and just from what I've seen, a lot of agencies don't take the time to sit down and write out sort of what they stand for and what they
Mhm.
believe and what their guiding principles are. And when you started telling me about some of those, I was just like, this is amazing. And you were kind enough to send them to me and say that it was okay to talk about these. Before I ask you about some specific ones, how did this come to be? How did
It's
they
fun.
come to life?
It's funny because we're gonna in June 1st, we're celebrating our third anniversary, and it just occurred to me and some of the other leaders that we're growing so fast since we started with 3 people and 3 years ago, and these things naturally have come about these ways, and it's stuff we've spoken of, but we never really wrote them down. And it occurred to me that sooner or later, there are going to be people here that we aren't going to be able to spend as much time with, or they're not going to be able to naturally, get this sense of who we are, how we work, all these things that are just intuitive to the people at Mischief right now.
Yeah.
So we just wanted to have them down somewhere and put them in a place where everyone knows what we stand for, how we behave, how we work around here. Culture is basically the way we do things around here. That's the definition of culture, an agency. And that's what this is. It's just a way of keeping us grounded, and for the people who are new, to help them understand what they're joining.
Yeah. And I imagine, obviously, when people they know, somebody who's lucky enough to come work for you is going to know some of this stuff. But
Hmm.
I think as you list them out, it just becomes so tangible and so
Yeah.
like I instantly understand why you guys have been so successful. So I'm going to ask you about a few of these. This particular one is from the Mischief Mindset, and it's number 2, and probably one of the more defining ones. But it's the riskiest thing we can do is be ignorable. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, and we're not the only ones to say that, but I do think we definitely live
You
it. I
lived it,
hope
yeah.
I hope we do. Um, yeah, because some people view risk as something that's going to put you in the limelight, and some people will hate it, and some people might love it. To me, that's not risk. To me, risk is doing something that nobody cares about. Indifference is the enemy is another one of ours,
Yeah.
and that's just like you're spending a lot of money if you're a brand or a client to put something in the world that nobody notices. That to me is a really risky thing to do. To do something that maybe some people might not like, but a lot of people love is I don't even see that as a risk.
And so, you've built a reputation of the agency, all of you, right? And like you said, it's not just you, but your whole team. And I imagine clients are coming to you because they know they want this type of work.
Yeah.
Has there ever been, or how would you handle a case where a client comes to you and once you present the work and it's maybe too risky for them and they don't want to do it? What would happen in that particular case? Because it doesn't sound like like you would say, well, let's just do the ignorable thing, right?
Well, honestly, it has not that I can't even pinpoint a time that's really happened just because we're very
Right.
intentional about what we put out there. And when we agree to take on an assignment or a client agrees to go with us, we have a mutual agreement of what we do and what we stand for. Yeah, and it's not like we're going to push buttons just for the sake of pushing buttons. I mean,
Sure.
we've done stuff for Pfizer and some other things that aren't, shocking or anything, but there's just a fresh way into it. So I guess what we really strive for is interesting. If they want to do something interesting, then we're all for it. It doesn't have to be a certain kind of tone. But if it's a client that just doesn't want what we do, it's like we're not right for each other, and we can almost tell that in the chemistry session.
Yeah, so that's part of the process is a chemistry session with the
I
client.
mean, I think one thing that's really helped us is from day one, we wanted to start as a brand. So people kind of knew what they got when they came to Mischief or what we stood for. So one just separates us, and also like it sort of a self-filtering process where if you don't want that kind of work, or if you aren't comfortable having those kind of things out there, then we're probably not right for you.
Right, which kind of plays into the next one, and which is what we say yes to shapes us, what we say no to defines us.
Yeah, yeah, we say no to a lot of things, and that's because it's just like it's not the right fit for us culturally, or maybe the conditions under which they want to engage us aren't right for us, and that goes for a lot of pitches, and things like that. Or we feel like it's not going to be right for our people, like it's going to overwork them and that kind of thing. So we do end up saying no to a lot, but that doesn't mean that we're snobby or anything. It's just
Right.
it wouldn't be right for both parties.
That's great. I read something, I think it was sort of like a written article where you talked about sort of your previous experiences in holding companies, right? And that the alpha male sort of vibe in the conference room. And I think you had a great phrase where it was like, there's some folks that see themselves as the master of the universe in a conference room, right? And you mentioned like not being able to, or not wanting to compete with that energy. Right. And that kind of leads me to this one, which is kindness is not a weakness. Do you feel like sometimes your kindness and your demeanor and your approach has been seen as kind of like a weakness, or where does that come from?
Yeah, I don't know if that's just me. And honestly, the holding companies I worked with were pretty cool. Like it wasn't them, but I've been in meetings with that puts you in a certain kind of environment with other kind of people that aren't that cool. So it's not a slam on anybody I was working with.
No. Yeah, sure.
But I do think in this industry, kindness can be seen as a weakness when you get up to the C levels, right? You sort of are expected to be like, I think that's changed, like sort of hard driving, type A personality, or hard selling, and that's just not the way we roll. But it's not, I just think also when going over the work, with teams, with each other, how we treat each other. And, it's okay to talk about the work in a certain way, but you don't talk about people that way.
Sure.
It's just a way of handling yourself in our office.
So, I mean, you've had a long career. You must have come up at certain points, where you did have maybe some, I've never been in this situation, but you read all the stories of really harsh criticism about work, or really pushing creatives very hard. Was that part of your experience, or not really?
No, by proxy. Because when I first went to BBDO, this was in early 2000s. David Lubarz, who brought me in, had just gotten there, and there's a lot of hangover from like the early Mad Men days when he first got there. And he turned the thing around. But there was a lot of stories in those hallways of like people getting pretty nasty with creatives and each other, and we always sought to change that. So I was close enough to where that culturally was still kind of happening in places, but I think for the most part no one's tolerating that anymore. I think we've all kind of grown out of it as an industry, hopefully.
Yeah, no, I hope so, because I just don't think it produces, at the end of the day, if we're thinking just about the work, it probably doesn't produce the best work.
No, it produces a lot of resentment, probably more than anything. It's just like you're doing it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
I think you get more work out of love than you would out of fear.
I agree. Although there are some people who have been on the show who said that there was an element of that kind of environment that helped them in some way, but they have come to realize, like, in the long term, that's not the best way to get the work out of people.
I also think it's just the way we are as people. We're driven internally. It's not like external. No one's gonna be harder on me than me. So I've got that. So my biggest fear in life has always been disappointing somebody. So like I said, no one's gonna be harder on me than me. So I don't need anybody to drive me or to berate me. And you find this with clients too, like the ones that you just can't wait to show them stuff, and you'll go out of your way. You'll work way over time and try to make sure it's the best work possible because they appreciate it and they expect it and they want it. It's not because they're going to yell at you if you don't do it or if they're going to be pissed. It's more of this forward motion versus trying to fight up against something.
I love that. I love that visual of you being excited to share ideas with the client, because I think, a lot of times it gets, there's almost like a feeling of dread, right? Like, oh, they're not going to like this. But it sounds like you're able to cultivate really great relationships with your clients where you have that excitement and you're like, oh my God, I can't wait.
We have some fun. Our meetings are fun. Yeah.
Tell me about a meeting like that.
It's kind of like you've seen the work we produce. Imagine what we didn't produce,
Right.
And it's usually for like good reasons, but we have some out there meetings, and clients appreciate that we come to things with a strategic approach. So it's not like this would be fun just because it's cool. It's always built on, here's the strategy, here's the thinking that got us here, and here's the unexpected way we express that. So, that becomes fun. It's not us trying to hard sell them. It's just how can we surprise them with the way we brought this insight to life.
Yeah, and I read a little bit where you said something about we're not selling ideas, we're just having conversations, right? And we're talking about ideas with our clients, and we eventually land on what we want to do.
Yeah, which comes back to like the demeanor of the agency. We're not hard sell people. We're more just like, we'll bring you in the process and the conversation and talk things through. So it's not like, ta-da, and buy this, or we're going to jump.
Right. And paint a picture for me. When you are presenting ideas, are you guys the type of agency that are doing, I don't know, I'm making shit up, but where you're acting things out, or you've made little prototypes of something, or you're showing little artifacts, and or is it more,
We go wide before we go too deep on it. We show a lot of ideas. I mean, that's always been like a rule of advertising, never show too many ideas, but depending on the project, if it's a project and it's kind of like an activation, we show a lot of ideas. And then once we lock in on a territory, we'll go blow it out. If it's a campaign, we'll go really deep for the next meeting, but we like to show a wide range of thinking, knowing that we can make each one great. We don't bring anything just in for number's sake. But yeah, it's usually pretty wide in the first run, and then we go deep. what we found with that, especially at the beginning when we were doing more project-based work, is they end up buying more than one thing. Like they fall in love with a couple and like, let's figure out a way to make this and this. So it's actually worked out pretty well for us in the beginning.
That's very cool. Um, Number 9, when in doubt, ask yourself, what would you do if you weren't afraid? And specifically, in your experience, what is, what causes the fear?
Yeah, I mean, I think fear has been a big driver in the industry for a long time. And it's usually like, if I say the wrong thing in this meeting, as a creative or someone, then the client's going to get pissed at me. And then I'm going to be taken off the account. And then when the time comes, I have no billings. It's just this cascade of fear that goes all the way down. It all stems from not being able to stand up for the work or showing a piece of work that might scare them. So if we just took that off the table, and you ask yourself, what would you do if you weren't afraid? It's usually the right thing for the client and for the agency. But fear kind of stops us because the safe thing in our minds is to not do anything. So it's just a way of opening up the gate.
And so, this practice, I imagine, comes during the ideation process, but then do you also sort of encourage in meetings, collaborative meetings with the client, you encourage your teams to say like, hey, if you don't know something, it's okay to say, I don't know, or it's okay to stand up for this idea. You're not going to get, there's no fear.
That's the rule. I mean, it's obviously we trust people in reason, but I think that just taking fear off the table is always going to result in the best relationship and the best work for the client. And what I found a lot of times, and people have said this to me coming in from different agencies, is like, we would never show that to the client. And it's like, then there's a 0% chance they're going to buy it. So
yeah,
right. So it's kind of like, it's not that it's wrong. You're just afraid to show it to them, or you're afraid they might react wrong. If they do, they do. That's part of, being in a relationship.
So as you were coming up, right, and from what I've read, right, you didn't know that this was going to happen, right? That the thing that happened with BBDO and the pandemic and all that stuff. So in your wildest dreams, did you ever think that you were going to have your own agency?
No.
And were you okay? So there was never a point where you were like collecting things in your pocket and going like, when I start my agency, I'm going to, this is the way you never had that.
No, I always had in the back of my head of like what I thought an ideal kind of creative chocolate factory would be like,
Yeah.
Like the perfect place. And it's kind of one of those things when your reality surpasses your dream. So I'm glad I kind of didn't plan it out too much. But yes, it happened all very out of the blue, surprising for everyone. I think even BBDO was sort of taken back by the amount of cuts we had to do that at that time, and certainly came up really quick. So when it happened, I really had no plan. I had no chance to kind of overthink it, and I just kind of let things happen. It was a very good opportunity to start from a white piece of paper of just, okay, the world has suddenly changed. Everything has changed. The new rules are being written right now. Let's be some of the people that are writing them.
Yeah, that's awesome. This one is for, now we're moving into the Mischief way. Mm-hmm. And I love this one because in my book, I talk about the no assholes rule. But you write, a culture is defined by the biggest asshole in the building. Be good to each other. How did that come about?
From working in big agencies, you kind of see no matter how many great people there are, just one person can bring the whole place down. And I just have a aversion to cynics and people that are just negative. So I'm not saying be phony, but just be aware that you don't want to be the one person that's dragging the culture down.
Yeah, because that really is true, right? It is like somebody else, said it in a different way, which is the biggest asshole in the agency is the culture in a way, right? And so, if you tolerate that, and sometimes maybe not in the creative area, but maybe in like a new business area or something like that, there are these people that they're rainmakers, but they're assholes, right? And it's kind of like eventually they're gonna bring the place down. So it's like you sacrifice, your biggest rainmaker for the overall culture of the agency.
Yeah, it's interesting you brought that up because now that you mention it, you're probably right. Like, it's usually not in the creative department. You know, maybe we're just like too sensitive or insecure to be like total asshole to other people, but it's probably not true. But now that you mention it, it's usually in other departments, and so I don't know what to do with that, but I'll keep my eye out for.
Keep your eye out for any assholes.
If
Um,
aren't-
I love this one too. Our clients are not our enemy; they are teammates, right? And it's I don't know where it came from or how it started.
yeah,
Maybe it was in the Mad Men era, right? Where there's this almost like a almost like a contempt, right? Or like
right.
they don't know what they're talking about, and there's kind of a it becomes a an us versus them kind of thing. How did you, when did you first realize it, and how did you, end up saying like that's not going to be the way we do things?
Well, I think it comes back to like you were saying, we're not salespeople. We're going to have a conversation with you, so it's not you know you against us on different sides of the table. It's like we're all gathered around the same problem, and we kind of once you understand that the client wants you to succeed and they want great stuff, then you kind of see things differently. It's not, you know, growing up, I've been in certain meetings where it felt like I just want to get this past them or get this through them. As a
Yeah.
junior, I think that's kind of the way you think because it's you're so focused on getting your own work through. Now it's like, what can we do that's going to change things for them? So you see them as your partners and your teammates, and you both want the same thing. I think you get to some really interesting, good places together. Yeah, I do think just the way the meeting dynamics are set up in some agencies, it's more of a us against them.
Right. Now, the people within your agency, you can sort of you can guide and you can shape and you can nurture, right, with some of this thinking, specifically the idea about not being fearful. But on the client side, you're not with them day to day. You don't know all their, whatever they might be going through. How do you instill that kind of fearless mentality in them? Or is it a function of that if they're coming to you and they're probably not fearful in the first place? Or does that make
If they're
sense?
open, yeah, yeah. If they're coming to us, they're probably open to something interesting, right? There's a reason they're coming to us, and our best new business tool is the work that we're doing for other clients. So if they see that, like it, appreciate the thinking behind it. Again, we're not here to shock people. We're here to do something that's interesting. So if they appreciate that, they're usually open to our way of thinking. And I think that's the benefit of having started from a clean slate of paper is that we can define our brand the way we want to, and it
Yeah.
attracts like-minded people.
Now, I've always kind of found in certain situations that it's very easy for people, anybody really, internally at an agency or even at the client, to look at work that's been successful and then say, well, why can't we do that?
Yeah.
Like, why can't? And the answer that I've kind of found is like, well, somebody had to say yes to
Yes.
that, and that takes a
Yeah.
lot of balls, and that takes a lot of fearlessness. So if we can be fearless, we might be able to get that.
Yeah.
But how can you? Uh, you don't want to persuade somebody if persuade's not the right word maybe, but how do you comfort somebody and say this is going to be okay, come with us here if they're fearful, like how do you sort of bring them along and try to ease their fears if they do
Well,
have any?
I think you talk them through and then understand that there are contingency plans. Like if you're worried about this blowing up
Mm,
on social, here are the responses that we have. We've done that quite a few times of like,
wow.
yeah, here are the responses that you have to this, and understand like you got to go in this together knowing that some people aren't going to like it, some people are going to love it. It's better than everybody feeling nothing. It's just that mindset. But you do, be smart about it, be responsible. And if it's not right, you shouldn't do it. If it's we don't we
Right.
don't want to push anybody to the point of, it's not right or it's way uncomfortable for them.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's a great. I mean, that's something that anybody can put into their plans now is to present contingencies. If you're
Mhm.
if you're pitching something that might be a little scary, is maybe present some contingencies. I love that. That's going in my little toolbox. Um, So this is one at the top here. Our process is simple: what to say and how to say it.
Yeah,
Two
two
steps.
steps. Yeah, that's it. Step one, what to say. Step two, how to say it. And I think what people miss out on is how important step one is. We spend a lot of time, most of our time, on strategy and figuring out like an interesting insight or interesting thing to say and a very clear thing to say. And then once we lock in on that, step two is like that's where you play, that's where you have fun, and make sure it's the most interesting way to say it. But you really have to focus on the what to say part first. I've found that throughout my career as a creative directors, when you're looking at work and it's kind of like there's nothing there, you're trying to make something out of nothing that teams have brought to you. I think 99% of the time it's not because the execution is just like they don't know what they're trying to say, right? It's the strategy's not right, or the it's not clear or simple enough, and it's leading to nowhere executionally because you haven't done the first part.
So if you had to say, right, with 100% being the total amount of time it takes to get to the ideas, what percentage of that is spent on part one? If you had to just venture a guess.
73.
73%. There there you heard it, folks. 73% is the magic number.
Yeah, I said it a bit in jest, but it is a great majority. It's over
Right.
it's over 50
Yeah.
for sure because our strategy sessions are very creative. We've always kind of said Mischief is a creative shop, our strategy shop disguised as a creative shop. So we all the CDs and CDs are in like sort of the strategy sessions, and our planners are in creative sessions. So it's very, by the time we come out of that phase one, there's already ideas baked into it, and it's already said in a way that's kind of like super interesting or something we can grab onto, and then we just go off and explore that for a couple more days or however long we have.
Yeah.
So it's not like we hand off to one
So
from
it's
one department to
okay.
the other.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not a definitive handoff. But
No.
does it start to kind of narrow down at a certain point to
Yeah.
creative for a little bit and then back
Oh yeah,
out?
for sure. For
Okay.
sure. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll start like the planners will go off and do some thinking, some research. They'll come to us with like rough territories. Then we'll just bat it out. We'll just like talk it through, come up with like two or three, maybe four areas. And then we, show those to the client. Creatives are involved. Kevin, Bianca, my ECDs, and myself are involved in all this. And then we show them to the client. We kind of get their heads around a couple things. And then once we get to a good place there, we will have known that we can execute off this because we've already thrown in some thought starters. And then we'll take them to the creatives, and they go off, right? And then work with Kevin, Bianca, and I, and then we quickly bring in planners and account people because it used to be this line that you almost had to protect the work from planners and account people, and we don't see it that way. It's almost like how can they help us with this? So again, if we're all focused on the same thing, which is how do we make the work better, it makes the process a lot easier.
Yeah, and probably a lot more fun, right? Because
Yeah.
it sometimes gets a little bit weird when it starts to get a little secretive, right? And it's a little like
Yeah.
people are hiding stuff from each other because they don't want unnecessary feedback, or it starts to get a little awkward.
Yeah. Never once. I was thinking about this in the 3 years we've been in Mischief. Have I heard the phrase or you said the phrase, like, that's not your lane? It's
Yeah.
just people, we kind of swim around the pool a lot in a good way. And people are very respectful. I think one of our other ones is like, you're surrounded by really good people, So,
Yeah.
respect that.
Yeah, and frankly, I mean, I think I'd love to get your perspective. You really in some ways can't have lanes. I guess you can have lanes in terms of like craft, once you get to sort of the crafting phase, right? But anything before that, there really shouldn't be any lanes because everything is so interconnected now, right?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
agree?
It is like, it's, like a DNA strand. It kind of goes around it, the same kind of system. But I think that there's a point. It's not a pure, democracy in a sense. Like someone's got to make the call
Sure.
sooner or later, right?
Right.
So it gets to a point, but it's a very collaborative process to get to the point where okay, now someone's going to make the call.
Yeah.
And yeah,
And it's kind of like I've always thought of it as almost like like you hear, on some legal drama or something, or somebody will say, we'll take that under advisement. It's that kind of, in my mind, it's that kind of feeling where it's like, I'm going to listen to everything that you said, respectfully and with real interest. And then at some point we got to decide, like, that makes total sense to me. This, not so much. We can't go away from that. And then to your point, somebody has to make the decisions. If not, it just becomes sort of, as my old boss used to say, a dog's breakfast, right? It's just kind of like,
it has to have a point of view at some point, and someone has to lead that. But a lot of Stoic principles are kind of embedded in these principles. Like, one is that I've always kind of tried to keep in mind is, like, ego is the enemy. So if you're doing something just to defend your ego, not the work, then that's probably not the right thing to do. You just kind of have to put that aside. Because our natural defense when someone challenges us is to step back and go on the offense. And that sometimes they're right. So you have to kind of take a moment to listen to it.
How have you personally been able to, when you were more on the receiving end of feedback, how have you been able to sort of extract yourself from the work? Does that just come with experience, with time, or is there a way, that a mindset that you kind of put yourself in when you're receiving feedback?
Yeah, it's not a natural mindset. Like I said, the immediate response, the reflexive response, is to defend it or get pissed. So you do have to it's a conscious thing you have to do, is take a step back, listen, because no one's going to change their mind if they don't feel you've at least heard them, right? So you have to take a step back, listen, think. Just ask yourself, what if they're right? And then take a moment to consider that, and then answer, or then think about it, or at least tell them you want to think about it. You don't have to have that answer right away.
What is it about creatives, and I talk about this as well, where we feel like we have to have the answer right then and be definitive and be like, and there's no shame, and if anything, it's good to take a beat and say, let me get back to you. But what is it about it that?
I don't know. I'm guilty of that as well. I think there's something within me that, like, I like to button things up and move on. Like, I don't like to leave anything hanging too long. So if there's a problem out there, I want to address it and make it go away. But that's not always the right thing to do. So I think there's a bit of that. And again, it's just like defending. It comes from maybe a bit of defending, or also just trying to make things right in the moment.
This one's really interesting to me, and I can't quite make it out. What does it mean when you say ties go to the creative?
Yeah, we are a creative shop, and a lot of this can be subjective. So when you're having a difference of opinion that's purely based on subjective, like, I don't like that, or that's not funny, ties go to creative. And it's not necessarily the creative department, it's the work. Like, if you're someone like, I don't know, I'm a little worried about that one, but I really like it, there's this debate back and forth, then we go with whatever's going to make the work better.
Yeah, I have a similar mentality where it's kind of like, again, going back to that idea of like, hey, I'm going to take all the feedback in, but if it comes to like red or blue, that's gonna be a creative decision. Yeah. Now, if somebody on the account side or the strategic side says, well, we can't do blue because some reason that's valid, then you sort of address it. But anything that kind of starts to creep into really pure creative, it's got to be a creative call.
Right. The former is not a tie. That's, if they have a valid reason, I don't consider that a tie. If it's just like, well, I don't like that one, can't really tell you why, but I do, then the ties go to the creative.
I love this one, and it's crazy to me that I've never heard this, and maybe because it's never been said, but I love it. Play the angel's advocate. Find ways to make the impossible possible. There's a funny. Are you a fan of The Onion? Do you remember that? Yeah, they once had a great headline, right? A fake headline that was like, guy who claims to be devil's advocate, really just an asshole, or something like that.
I kind of remember that one. Yeah, classic. Yeah, it's usually the truth. I mean, anyone who says, let me play the devil's advocate, it's like, no, you're just going to play the devil. Like, you're not, but there's a need to find holes in things. I understand that. Sometimes that makes our arguments stronger, but I like to look for ways to make things happen. Our account people are amazing. Like, they'll come in and just find ways to make things whether it's, the budget or ways to think about things. And I think that's really refreshing for a creative is, the ability to walk into something that might seem challenging, but be surrounded by people who are going to find ways to make it happen.
Yeah. So if you, I mean, is that literally a thing that people will say in a meeting, like, hey, let me just play the angel's advocate here for a second?
We never really said it that way, but we do have a deck that we present to some of our clients, the new clients of called Buying the Bold, and it takes how to evaluate work and how to, get to great work with us. And one of the principles is, play the angel's advocate. And it's this idea that there's so many reasons to say no. Saying no is easy. Saying hard sometimes is yes. I mean, saying yes is hard. And
Right.
I think that some people need to kind of just shift the mindset a little bit. And that having a handle like angel's advocate helps.
I love that. I can't wait to use it. What was the name? Sorry, you said it's a document that you've created. What is it called?
Buying the bold, buying the bold.
Got
It's
it.
just a thing what helps us with feedback and certain points and things we've learned about, what it takes to actually do good work and even help sell throughout the organization.
Again, I just love that you guys have taken the time to write this out. This one I think might be near and dear to your heart, but it's often the quiet ones ensure all voices are heard. How do you make that, how do you make that a reality? And is that just kind of based on your experience coming up? Did you ever feel like you were the quiet one that wasn't getting heard?
No, I don't think so. People say that about me, but
You're
I
not
think
that quiet?
I think they're probably surprised to be that I do speak up and that I'm not actually that quiet, but maybe I am. Maybe it's just in my head. I've always said inside I'm an extrovert,
Yeah.
but but
Inside
not
you're an
maybe.
extrovert. Yeah.
Yeah. What goes on my head doesn't always come out, but I think that in advertising, there's a lot of attention put on showy people and people that can present well and are big personalities. But if you just take time and make a focus to listen to the ones that aren't speaking or the ones that just have great thoughts, you'll get some really valuable stuff. And you gotta give them their fair share too, because it's we have some really funny, great personalities in this industry. It's easy to become overshadowed and feel intimidated if you're not quiet, but doesn't mean you're not brilliant.
Yeah. And so are there ways that you build into, let's say, your ideation sessions or into the way that you do creative where you make room or you have certain for lack of a better word, channels for the quiet ones to get ideas to you? Because I think that can be an issue at certain places where there's not really a mechanism for a quiet person to get ideas to,
I think it's more of an atmosphere than anything of just trying to listen to people and hoping people can speak up, when they need to and feel like we will listen to them. We're not just, sort of berating people and trying to push our opinions through. There's meeting dynamics in any agency, in any meeting, but we try to just make it as easy for people to express themselves as possible. Again, it comes back to that mantra of what would you do if you're not afraid? It's like taking fear out of the room, and that makes it sometimes easier for people to speak up. And some people just express themselves differently. Maybe they'll send you a email, maybe it's a text,
Right.
maybe it's just through the work. But just try to work with everyone however they best communicate. And I do come, I guess you would say, I do come more from the quiet side than the brash side. So I have a bit of understanding of what that's like.
Yeah. That's cool. And that's something that I work on sort of in the opposite way, where I try to be mindful because I love to talk, right? Obviously, this is why I do the podcast. And oftentimes, as you know, right, you're in a session, sometimes it's hard to get people to talk, right? And so
Yeah.
sometimes I feel like I need to fill that void, right? So I often try to just tell myself, okay, just maybe don't talk here. Maybe sit in the awkward silence for a little bit and let somebody else chime in. But
Yeah,
it's different.
everybody works differently, man. So funny. I saw this interview with Elon Musk. I don't know if you saw it, but he's kind of his own thing anyway. But someone asked him a question, and it was literally 30 seconds, I think, of silence before he answered the question. Just sitting there. I don't know if that was a power game or what. Or you could tell he was really thinking about the answer. And To be honest with you, I don't think the answer was even that great, but it was like the weirdest, most interesting interview I've seen because nobody said anything for like 30 seconds
Yeah,
and
and
they just let it hang.
that's a thing that I learned about, right? It's called like the I can't remember what it's called, golden silent. I don't know. And it can be used as sort of a way to, like, I might do that to you, right? To try to get, because typically if you wait long enough, somebody will say something, right?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
they weren't
Oh, it's
planning
100%
on
a
saying.
trap. I know what
Yeah.
you
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
exactly. But you know what? Now you bring up Elon Musk, I saw a really sort of strange one a couple days ago where he seemed really like subdued and almost like I don't know if the word was scared, but he just seemed like really different. And he was talking about AI, and then he
Oh
just
God.
kind of like he just got
If you
kind of really weird about it, and basically said like that maybe he was sort of delusional about how it's all going to end up or something
Oh
like
my
that. But
God.
I found it really interesting because
Well,
he looked like maybe it was the same interview.
maybe it's very worrying though if he's afraid, because he knows stuff we don't, right? He's
Yeah,
seen the inside, and he's also say what you will about his persona right now, but he is one that can see in the future.
yeah.
So pay attention.
Well, a good segue there. What does the future? And we don't have to spend too much time talking about AI because I know a lot of people are talking about it. But just in
Yeah.
general, what do you see as the future of our business? What are the things that we should be excited about? What are the things that we should be concerned about? Anything that you're kind of mulling around?
I think the need for creativity is going to just grow. I think there's going to be a lot of mediocre content out there for the time being if people rely on AI to do it. I think right now we're enamored by the fact it can do it versus how well it's doing it or how interestingly it's doing it. So there's going to be a little bit of a lag time. I think sooner or later, it's moving at a pace that we can't really predict. That might change, but right now, what gets me excited is that there's clients that are willing and understanding that they have to they have to break through. Our attention span, in what we're being pulled into is just, it's unprecedented. We've never had so many channels of communication, many things pulling for our attention. So you really have to break through and come up with ways that reach people.
Yeah.
I think that's exciting. I like that. And I like the clients understand that because it gives us, room to play.
Are you a fan of Rick Rubin, and have you read his latest
I
book?
have. Yeah,
Did you?
amazing.
It is,
So
right?
good. Yeah, every chapter is like, God, you learn something. I highly recommend anybody to either read it or listen to the audiobook because his voice reading it is actually a nice way to experience it.
Yeah. I did. I got the audiobook and then I would read along to try to really absorb as much
Yeah,
as possible.
that's a pure way to do it. But,
One
yeah,
thing that he talks about, and I don't know if he talked about it specifically in the book, but people have asked him like, well, what makes you who you are? Or what makes you so special? And he said something that was he phrased it really. You could tell that he's had this answer, but he phrased it in a way where he said, people believe that that there's something special about my taste, or he said
yeah,
something about taste,
yeah,
right? Because at the end of the day, if AI continues to go the way that it is, there still needs to be a person, a human, that is making a selection based on
yes.
impeccable taste, right? So how does one cultivate better taste in your opinion?
Gosh, I don't know. I guess if there's a formula, everybody would have it. But taste is so individual, it's so specific. That's why it can't be replaced by AI because your taste is only specific to you. And that's what you're getting paid for. That's why you are where you are. It's like someone trusts your taste. And, that's the system of advertising is you have to grow into that. No one's going to trust you your first day because you don't have the experience, you don't have the knowledge or just the exposure to develop that taste. But I think as you grow, it just continues to develop. Yeah, you bringing that up reminds me of another piece of content I saw, which was, did you ever see the movie September Issue about Anna Wintour?
No, no.
It's a movie that it was a documentary that came out of 5 or 6 years ago, and it was Anna Wintour kind of going through the process of making the September Vogue issue, and it was kind of brilliant because there's a scene in which she was surrounded by all these photographs, surrounded by these tastemakers and creatives. She walked in the room, everyone's silent. It's like the ballsiest creative director move. She went, that one, that one, that one, that one, not that one, that one. That one goes here. She knew exactly what the hell she wanted. It was so intuitive. Whether she would actually believe that or not, or she just put this air on that instilled the confidence, you understood what Anna Wintour made it, what made her her, and why she was getting the bucks she was getting at that position, because she had definitive taste, and that was cultivated through years of doing this and understanding the world, and that it'd be very hard for AI to replace that.
Yeah. So that gives me hope, and heartens that there always be a need for people that can kind of use their taste and their understanding of the world to say this has a better chance of working. This is really great. Maybe this could be if you tweak that or whatever. But I hope that there's still a human being.
It's everything you do. It's life experience informs your taste. So if you have never been alive, I don't think you'll have great taste.
Yeah.
You'll be able to make some sort of analytical judgment, but I don't think you'll have any sense of what's unstated or what's out in the atmosphere.
So speaking of life experience is a good place to close here. If you had to say something, right? A lot of the people that listen to my show are up and coming creatives. What would you tell them if you had one message to impart on them based on your experience? What would it be?
Yeah, so I've been asked this on other podcasts and given a similar answer, but I do think just enjoy the process, enjoy the ride, because there's a lot of this business that is focused on getting some sort of approval from somebody else, whether it's your client, your creative director, your award show judge, and then you're sort of delaying your happiness and putting it in their hands. Just enjoy what you do. Be into the process. Be good at everything you do, and that will take you to the next step. If you're too focused on other things, then I think you lose the moment. So I just say enjoy the process for what it is. There's a line I read, I've quoted it before, but it makes a lot of sense to me. It's just that the person who loves walking will go further than the one who loves the destination. So I think that's a good way to approach this career.
And this is something that I struggle with, right? And when I remember, I call myself on it, and I try to remind my team about it, which is we have to be excited about the fact that we get to come up with ideas for a living. And whether the idea ever sees the light of day or not, we have to be excited about that. But I think just as probably as humans and creatives, we get a lot of satisfaction and kind of, what I call creative capital when your idea does come to life, right? But I mean, think about how many ideas we come up with and how few of them actually ever get made. So you have to really enjoy
it's a game of that, attrition. You kind of have to be able to survive the system of like coming up with one more good idea than they've killed. That's the game, right?
Yeah.
So, I used to say at some of the other places, like, be good one more time than they're being bad, and then you win.
Oh my God, you're like giving me a bunch of gold nuggets that are going to make the cut downs. Well, I want to be mindful of your time, Greg. This has certainly been, a highlight of the podcast. As I mentioned to you, I wanted to save you for the 50th episode. And I'm so glad that you did it. And I really appreciate you taking the time, and just really thankful for your generosity and just being so open and so kind and willing to, share your experience and just your wisdom. And I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a great conversation, and I appreciate you asking me to be on your 50th episode. That means a lot. I know 50 is a big number to reach in this game, so congratulations on that. You're pretty good at this, so I'll see you at the 100.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna have you on the 100, and we'll see where we are at that time. But thanks, and I look forward to keeping in touch and just kind of touching base from time to time. And I'm so excited about what the future holds for you, and I'm excited to see the next big thing that you do.
For sure. Mischief LA. I'll meet you there.
All right. Yeah, I'll meet you there. And next time you're in town, I hope we can get together. I'll bring some guitars. You don't have to travel with your guitars. I'll bring some amps, and maybe we can sit and have a little jam session somewhere.
Sounds good.
Okay. All right. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. And there you have it, folks. The 50th episode of Confessions of a Creative Director in the books. Thanks to my very, very, very special guest, Greg Hahn. Thank you for being here on this special occasion. I'm so excited I made it to 50 episodes. I think it's quite a milestone. Hopefully you do too. Thank you to all the listeners who tune in regularly, and thanks especially to those of you who have subscribed to the podcast. I hope more of you will subscribe. Hey, folks, this is really a masterclass for creative directors from some of the best creative directors in the world. I mean, Greg Hahn, you're hearing directly from him on what it takes to create a killer agency. So that's the kind of stuff you can't find anywhere. So please subscribe to the podcast. Tell all your creative friends about it. Let's grow this thing and make it into a big deal, a big juggernaut. That would be really awesome. Also, if you're interested, check out my website, JaimeCabreraCreative.com. There you can find a link to my book, What's the Big Idea? An Indispensable Guide to Becoming a Kick-Ass Creative Director. You can also learn about my one-on-one coaching. You can find links to the podcast. You can find links to my music. It's really the one-stop shop for everything that I'm doing to help the next generation of creative directors become kick-ass creative directors. So, until next time, peace, love, and creativity. 50th episode, 50 episodes. It's awesome. Thanks. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.
I don't want to tell you how to do your job, but could you make the logo